Welcome to Pop/Back. I'm your host, Rick Smalls, flying solo today. Tina Boucher is on special assignment, something about helping the boss reach the top shelf. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about the life of a rock and roll icon, a drummer who was as famous for his antics off stage as he was for his explosive energy behind the kit. Keith Moon, the legendary wild man of The Who. You know, when you think about iconic rock drummers, Keith Moon's name is always right up there. But what made him so unique? It wasn't just the crazy hotel room stories, though there are plenty of those. It was his drumming. The way he approached the instrument was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before.
He was almost like a jazz drummer trapped in a rock band. He emphasized the tom-toms and cymbal crashes, creating these huge dramatic fills that turned his drum kit into another lead instrument.
It's true. He didn't just keep time. He created these waves of sound, these sonic explosions that drove The Who's music and gave it this raw, untamed energy. And get this, he hated drum solos. Can you imagine a drummer hating drum solos?
It makes sense when you think about his philosophy. Moon wasn't interested in showing off his technical skills in isolation. He saw the drums as an integral part of the band's sound, a way to add drama and excitement to the songs, not just a platform for self-indulgence.
So where did this incredible, unconventional style come from? Let's rewind back to Keith's early years. He was born in Wembley, London in 1946, and as a kid he was drawn to music, but not necessarily the rock and roll we associate him with.
His first instrument wasn't even a drum set. He started with the bugle in the Sea Cadet Corps band.
Bugle? That's a far cry from the thunderous drums of The Who.
He eventually found his way to the drums, and it was like a lightning strike. It was clear from the beginning that he was a natural. He was playing in cover bands as a teenager, soaking up influences from all over the musical map: surf music, Motown, rock and roll, even jazz.
Yeah, you can hear echoes of all those styles in his playing, but he took them and blended them into something completely new. His drumming heroes were guys like screaming Lord Sutch's drummer Carlo Lid, known for his wild stage presence. And then there's jazz legend Gene Krupa, who was all about speed and flashy technique. You can see how those influences, that mix of showmanship and technical skill, really shaped Keith's approach.
It's fascinating how he absorbed these different styles and transformed them into something uniquely his own. He had this innate ability to take what he learned and create something completely original.
And that originality was on full display when he auditioned for The Who in 1964. He was just 17 years old, but he walked in and basically took over.
The story of that audition has become legendary. Apparently, he showed up all dressed in ginger hair clothes the whole bit. He practically challenged the band, saying he could drum better than anyone they had.
Talk about confidence. But he could back it up. He jumped on the kit, played one song, Roadrunner, and practically demolished the drums in the process. Broke a bass drum pedal, ripped through drum heads. It was pure, unadulterated energy.
He was clearly nervous, but that raw talent and power were impossible to ignore. It was a defining moment, not just for Keith, but for The Who's future.
Right, you had Daltrey and Townsend, these already powerful personalities, and then you add Keith Moon to the mix. It was a recipe for fireworks, both on stage and off. And musically, you couldn't have asked for a better match. Moon's drumming brought a whole new dimension to The Who's sound.
It wasn't always easy. John Entwistle, the bassist, was known for his incredibly precise playing, and Moon's free-flowing style initially drove him crazy. But somehow they found a way to make it work. That tension, that push and pull between their styles actually became a defining characteristic of The Who's music.
It's like they needed that chaos, that unpredictability to create the music that made them legends.
It's that zigzag playing that really set him apart. He wouldn't play his kit in a linear way like most drummers. He'd jump around hitting toms and cymbals seemingly at random, creating this unpredictable, almost chaotic rhythm that kept everyone on edge.
Wait, zigzag. I've heard that term before, but what does that actually mean when you're talking about drumming?
Imagine a drummer playing a simple beat. Bass drum, snare drum, bass drum, snare drum. Most drummers would hit those drums in a straight line down the middle of the kit. Keith Moon, on the other hand, might hit the bass drum, then a tom-tom way over to the side, then the snare, then another tom-tom back to the bass drum. He was constantly moving around the kit, creating these unexpected patterns and accents.
So it wasn't just random bashing. There was a method to the madness.
Absolutely. He was incredibly musical, even in his most chaotic moments. He knew how to use those seemingly random fills to build tension release energy and create these incredible dynamic shifts within a song. It was like controlled chaos.
Man, I wish I could have seen him play live. It must have been something else. What stands out to you about his impact on rock drumming? Let us know in the comments. But you know, Keith Moon wasn't just a drummer. He was a performer, a showman, and even dabbled in songwriting and singing.
He loved to be the center of attention. He'd sing backing vocals, add funny commentary during songs, and he even sang lead on a few early Who tracks. Bucket T, Barbara Ann. Those are some fun examples of his vocal contributions.
Yeah, and he actually wrote some songs for The Who too, I Need You, Cowboys and Strange in the City. They might not be as famous as Townsend hits, but they show you just how multi-talented he really was. But let's be honest, when we talk about Keith Moon, it's hard not to talk about, well, Moon the Loon, the wild side. The stories are legendary.
Well, where do we even begin? The hotel room destruction, the pranks, the explosions. It's almost hard to believe some of the things he did.
Like that infamous story about his fascination with blowing up toilets. And we're not talking about little firecrackers here.
No, we're talking dynamite.
Dynamite. Seriously.
He had this mischievous streak, this urge to push things to the limit, and sometimes, well, things went a bit too far.
And his 21st birthday party at a Holiday Inn in Flint, Michigan is still talked about in hushed, horrified tones in the music industry.
That's the stuff of rock and roll legend. Food fights, fire extinguishers, a piano in the pool. The bill was reportedly over $20,000 in damages in 1967 dollars. Imagine what that would be today.
It's amazing they let him into another hotel after that.
He seemed to have this almost supernatural ability to charm his way out of trouble. He had a charisma, a roguish charm that people were drawn to even when he was behaving badly.
But all that excess, the alcohol, the drugs, the wild living, took its toll. Things started to get darker as the years went on.
Yeah, the onstage collapses, hospitalizations, those were signs that things were spiraling. And there was that show in 1973 where he passed out during the set, and a fan had to fill in on drums.
Wow, that's a dedicated fan. And a pretty surreal situation to find yourself in, suddenly being asked to drum for The Who.
It was a testament to the power of rock and roll and the connection The Who had with their audience, but it was also a sign that things were getting really bad for Keith.
And sadly, they continued to spiral.
Which raises an important question for our listeners. Did Moon's destructive behavior overshadow his musical genius? Or are they inseparable parts of his legacy? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. It's a sad truth that behind the laughter and outrageous stories, Keith Moon was fighting a losing battle with his demons. The years of hard living had caught up with him, and despite attempts to get healthy, the damage was irreversible.
It's heartbreaking, really, to think that someone so full of life, so talented, was ultimately consumed by his own struggles.
And tragically, in 1978, at just 32 years old, Keith Moon passed away from an overdose of heminevrin, a sedative prescribed for alcohol withdrawal. It was a devastating loss for the music world, a reminder that sometimes the brightest flames burn out the fastest.
It's hard to believe he was only 32. It feels like he lived a dozen lifetimes in those few short years. He crammed so much living, so much music, so much chaos into his time. It's almost Shakespearean, this mix of genius and self-destruction.
And yet, even though his life was cut tragically short, his impact on music, on rock drumming specifically, is immeasurable. He was posthumously inducted into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame in 1982, cementing his place as one of the greats.
And let's not forget, in 2011, Rolling Stone readers voted him the second greatest drummer of all time, second only to John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. It's some pretty elite company.
It is. And it speaks to the enduring power of his playing. Even today, drummers all over the world are studying his style, trying to capture that lightning in a bottle. But the thing is, Keith Moon couldn't be replicated. He was one of a kind. He didn't just play the drums, he attacked them. He was a force of nature.
And as much as his wildness can be frustrating, even infuriating to his bandmates, they all recognize his brilliance. Pete Townsend once said that Moon was a completely different person to anyone I've ever met.
And that's the perfect way to sum him up, isn't it? Completely different. He was an innovator, a showman, a musical visionary. He pushed the boundaries of what was possible with a drum kit, creating a sound that was both exhilarating and unpredictable.
So what's Keith Moon's legacy? It's complex, isn't it? On the one hand, he was a cautionary tale about the dangers of excess, a reminder that the rock and roll lifestyle, if not handled with care, can be a destructive force.
But on the other hand, he was a brilliant musician, a pioneer who redefined the role of the drummer in a rock band. He brought a raw, untamed energy to The Who's music that couldn't be replicated. And while his offstage antics might have overshadowed his musical talent at times, they're also part of what made him so captivating, so unforgettable.
You can't really separate the two, can you? The wildness, the chaos, the sheer joy he brought to playing it was all part of the package. It fueled his music, and in a way, it fueled his demise. It's a tragic reminder that the brightest stars sometimes burn out the fastest.
But their light continues to shine long after they're gone. And Keith Moon's light, well, it's still burning bright, inspiring generations of drummers and music lovers around the world.
It's amazing to think about the impact he had,
Yeah.
in such a short time. For all his wildness, Keith Moon was also a gifted musician. There was a finesse and artistry to his drumming that separated him from so many others.
Absolutely. It wasn't just brute force. He had an incredible sense of dynamics, of knowing when to hold back and when to unleash that tidal wave of sound. He was like a painter using his drums to create these sonic landscapes, these moments of sheer power and beauty.
So it's like he was channeling some primal energy,
Yeah.
this untamed rhythm that was both exhilarating and, a little bit terrifying.
Exactly. And that's what made him so captivating to watch. You never knew what he was going to do next. He kept you on the edge of your seat, wondering if he was going to implode, explode, or somehow manage to hold it all together.
He was a true showman, no doubt. But he was also a musical visionary. He helped redefine what a rock drummer could be, paving the way for generations of drummers to come.
And here's a thought to ponder, something to leave our listeners with. What if Keith Moon had lived? What if he'd managed to conquer his demons and continued making music? What would The Who have sounded like in the 80s, the 90s, even today?
Wow, that's a fascinating question. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? He was such a defining force in their sound. Would they have continued to evolve? Or would his presence have kept them tethered to a certain era?
It's impossible to know for sure, but it's fun to speculate. Would he have mellowed with age, or would he have remained a chaotic force of nature, pushing the boundaries of music right up until the very end?
I guess that's a part of what keeps the legend of Keith Moon alive. The mystery, the what-ifs, the endless possibilities.
He was a true original, a musical genius, a cautionary tale, and an icon who continues to fascinate and inspire us even decades after his passing.
Well said. Thanks for listening. Remember to like and subscribe so you can get our next episode. Smalls out.